studio. This is another episode of the Mind Body Marathon. And on today's show, we have Dr. Jared and Dr. Matt.
Hello.
And so we got some of the clinic cronies on the stage today. And what we're going to go over is hydration, episode about just general hydration principles and things to kind of help improve your quality of performance and featuring our shows today. We have these fancy new water bottles. So the guys are really into their how do you say, like, over hydration or hydrogen waters, essentially?
Hydrogen water.
Hydrogen water, right? So tell us about that real quick.
So essentially it's electrolysis, and it's, I guess, splitting the water molecule and creating hydrogen gas, which the hydrogen atom, the hydrogen ion, is a selective antioxidant. So those free radicals floating around, it binds to those free radicals selectively, and then it doesn't harm any of the other tissues around it. So
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
Did yours just beep? Is that what it was?
no, that was mine beeped like a second ago.
Okay.
So yeah,
These are, you guys bought them what, for like $40 on Amazon? Is that what you did?
Yeah. So like, I forget which podcast I was listening to, probably like 6 months ago, and they were talking about it. And they have like a big famous brand that's out there that's like $250. And I just went with the Amazon like $40
Yeah,
one.
that's classic Ron Swanson, Matt over here.
And I mean, it definitely forces you to drink a little bit more. It like makes the taste of water a different palpable taste to it. So
like, why would that? It makes you want to drink more, or you feel like you need to drink more?
I almost feel like I need to drink more. Like I get done with it and I need more quenching, of it. So I just drink more throughout the day when I have something like this. But it's a really nice bottle. It's glass, so it's no plastic or anything like that.
And that's just the thing. It's like, that when I was in Europe, almost every bottle, I mean, there's really not plastic around anywhere, really. One of the things we're finding, obviously, is the forever chemicals and plastics and just higher proportions of it in the brain and all that sort of thing. So obviously not optimal to have everything in plastic. And I think the rise of the Stanleys and all those fancy bottles of the world is a good thing. But I think just the general focus on hydration. And I think a lot of people are more focused on hydration a lot now too, mainly for the beauty aspect of it, plumping up the skin and just kind of helping to get rid of wrinkles and aging gracefully and all that, which I think are all great qualities. From a performance standpoint, one of the big things, obviously, I think there's a resurgence in hydration as well. I feel like for a while there was a big focus on gels and different goos and things like that for performance, and then now all the new sports nutritionists are sort of making their way back to getting back to hydrating principles, and it seems like that shift is happening.
Yeah, definitely. Like 90s was like all about the Powerade, Gatorade, and then that kind of like had a command, and then they stopped and they went into like fuel. So
yeah, and then it's like, I know personally when I'm performing. So first of all, let's just kind of let's just state it. So let's just get this out there, out in the open. How much water should people drink a day? Generally speaking, I've always kind of opened that up to about half your body weight in ounces. Is that kind of what you guys say?
Yeah, I think the standard they say is like 8-ounce waters, like a day minimum.
Yeah.
But that's not for the athlete. That's just for somebody who's like desk job type of thing.
Yeah. So that kind of roughly for the general population might work out to that. So I think, obviously not everybody weighs the same. So that kind of matters. So about half of your body weight in ounces. And, say you're of moderate activity, what should you add in more?
I would, moderate activity, you should be obviously increasing probably at least another 20% of hydration. But the biggest thing would be also replenishing electrolytes, because you're going to lose that through just the way that the cells, are utilizing like fuel. It's going to be a byproduct that you're going to blanch out some of the sodium and potassium and stuff, but also just sweat just like drains your body of electrolytes.
Yeah. And I think it also matters the climate you're in. Like we're in a Northeast Ohio, Midwest. If you're at altitude or the desert, or very humid climate like Brazil or Florida or something like that, or Texas, those are going to be scenarios where your hydrating principles are going to be different.
Hmm.
At altitude, you might not notice you're losing water as much as you might if you're in the desert or in human climate. But I think it's important to track that accordingly. And also, shockingly, in the winter, you'll lose a decent amount because the air is so dry. Because there's obviously not as much moisture being created from the heat, and so the moisture is sort of trapped in the ground, so it feels very dry in the air. So you can tend to lose it through respiration at a higher rate.
Hmm.
So those are all things to kind of pay attention to: is the time of year, your location, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so there's not like an optimal time. It just should be, you should always kind of be focused on it. If you think about it, like in Northeast Ohio, we have 4 seasons. And so, like the winter, you should be focused on it because you're losing it through respiration. The summer,
Yeah.
you're going to sweat. And who knows what the temperature is going to be during the fall or spring.
I
So
think I literally had have you guys ever had anybody have water toxicity?
no,
Yeah, I've had
no.
a couple patients actually
Yeah.
have that.
I've probably been close because I tried to chug a bottle or a gallon of water when I was
Oh,
in
that
high
is
school.
so dangerous, man. That is so dangerous. But yeah, I mean, hyponatremia or water toxicity is a real thing. And that's why I appreciate the advent of products like Noon and Element and Liquid IV, which basically supplies you with some electrolytes, which will help you retain the water better.
Mhm.
What are some of your guys' favorite options with that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Element is great. You can just a packet or one of the cans that has the salt and the potassium and the magnesium in it. But I found that I can actually recreate that. So, like at the store, they have a brand. It's called New Salt, and it's literally just potassium chloride. And so I'll take table salt, which is sodium chloride, and then mix it with a magnesium powder, and then the new salt, and I literally have like created my own bulk like element and put
Well,
some
how do you
lemon juice.
flavor it then?
Well, yeah, I'll put some lemon juice in it and mix it up, and
There you
that's
go.
that's how I do it.
Element does not want you to say that. No, that's really cool. That's yeah, you two are like the classic tinkers, just messing with things all the
Yeah.
time.
I was like classic Powerade guy, and like when I was younger, just because I thought Gatorade was just too sugary. I thought Powerade was more salt, but then the two, and then now, pretty much I just do either Element or I just
Yeah.
go off water.
I like Element more so than some of the other brands, mainly because, like a lot of the other ones like Liquid IV and things like that, they try to throw like B vitamins in there, and they try to throw like, a little bit other flavors and just things that I think makes it less absorbable.
Mhm.
The great thing about your product that you created in bulk and some of the ones that just have your simple electrolytes, it just gets in quicker.
Mhm.
And one of the common principles of the body is that water follows sodium, and that's one of the most tightly regulated systems in the body.
Mhm.
And so, whenever you take in sodium, especially at a ratio with potassium and magnesium, it tends to absorb better and quicker, and you'll retain more water. So, if you have somebody and they like they were sick and they basically look puffy, like after they maybe had like a norovirus or something, that a GI tract virus or even the flu or something like that, a lot of times they'll look puffy in the face. They need electrolytes. They don't need as much hydration as you might think. They actually need electrolytes more so because you need to get the water out of the extracellular matrix into the cell. And that's why they look puffy. So that's something to keep in mind if somebody's coming off of. That's why like Pedialyte and those things tend to really kind of spice people back up after they're sick, because the electrolytes in those products tend to help the water get into the cell. Because again, a common principle of physiology is that water follows sodium.
Mhm.
So you do need a decent level of sodium and not necessarily be scared of hypertension or blood pressure.
Mhm.
So if you have someone that is hypertensive, would you ever recommend them drinking like distilled water without raising like sodium levels, or like have electrolytes in there? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on what they're doing. If
Uh,
they're not necessarily, if they're hypertensive because they're just maybe not as fit and active,
mm,
then probably not as much electrolytes are needed. But if they are hypertensive and they are fit and active, well, then yeah, they do. It just still like they just still need to replace those electrolytes. Um, and again, all the research in the past that showed that if you take in sodium and then you'll become hypertensive, that was just for a short window. You take in sodium and you measure somebody 10 to 30 minutes after you take that in, they will be slightly hypertensive. But then if you measure an hour later, once the body had a chance to regulate the sodium levels and put it in excrete it to the urine, in the kidneys, then it just regulates the fluid transfer, and then all of a sudden you're not hypertensive anymore. So it's that bolus of sodium can create a transient hypertension,
Okay.
but not necessarily chronic hypertension, which is obviously damaging to the vessels.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I would say that that's a great thing to do. I mean, unless you have somebody who's in like severe like kidney failure or something
yeah, I
like
mean
that.
these are
Yeah.
yeah, in those
Yeah.
situations obviously consult the doctor, but
But even still in that case too, like, well, I have a couple athletes that have like were born with only like one kidney. So
yeah,
that's something that you have to kind of take into consideration because your kidneys are by far probably the most regulatory system
yeah, it's
for regulating your electrolytes. So if you have kidney failure or if you have, one functioning kidney, or if you've been a really, good human being and have donated a kidney, that's something to take into consideration
right.
and, with your electrolyte
Yeah, that's
process.
huge. So and with from the performance aspect, I feel like one of the biggest things that happens with sodium and hydration is that in performance, so say we're running a marathon, one of the hardest things to master is cardiovascular drift, which is basically as the event goes on, if we're tracking somebody that's trying to run a PR marathon, they tend to run the fastest miles right around half marathon ish, maybe like 11, 12 ish to like 16 to 18. And that's because, they're adequately into the race. All their systems are firing and they're light because they've lost a decent amount of blood volume because they've been running over an hour at this point. So they've lost some blood volume, they've lost some weight, they're lighter than normal. And then now, actually, once they kind of start to get closer to 20, then that cardiovascular drift starts to hit you and become a negative thing. So the longer you can, or the more you can keep hydrated through that process and put off that cardiovascular drift, which basically is once your blood volume drops from performance, your heart rate will spike
Mhm.
because you have less blood volume. So you need to kick out your heart rate higher to get the blood across the body quicker. And so that'll actually kind of max things out a little bit. And the second thing that happens is that whenever you're performing, and you start to produce slight amounts of lactic acid, well, if your blood volume decreases, that concentrates your lactic acid. So your perception of effort changes because you're feeling a higher ratio of lactic acid.
Mm.
It's not like you're producing more of it, you're just feeling more of it. It's dissolved and less fluid. So your cellular, or so your bloodstream is just kind of essentially filled with more of it. And so that's something to keep in mind when we're performing, that we really do focus on hydrating early. And so that way we can offset those effects once we get past the mile 20 in the marathon.
So, would you recommend at the aid stations, like in the first half, sticking just to water, and then, as you get past the half, go into like the Powerade or whatever sports drink they
Well, so
offer?
this depends on what people are doing with their goos and all that sort of stuff. Like for me, I take Morton. And I have found, actually, I've done 2 marathons where I didn't even need to take in fluid because I just took in Morton's. Now, I'm not advising people to do that, but I was just testing. I felt like I didn't even need water because that's the hydrocell matrix, and basically it doesn't soak up as much water, like if you took a traditional goo or something like that. So I felt like that was a little different scenario. But what I would do is, if your gel game or your goo game is good and you're planning on taking, 3, 4, 5, or even 6, then I would just focus on water.
Okay.
But if you're not able to handle gels or goos or anything along those lines, then yeah, I would go a mix of water and Powerade or Gatorade or whatever they offer in the course. But in the end, I personally focus more on I almost never take Gatorade in. I almost always take water in, and I'll often do Gatorade late in the race, maybe at like mile 18 on,
Okay.
and just swish it around my mouth and then spit it out. Because there I'm trying to trick my body Like say I get to like an aid station at mile 20, 22, 24, whatever. I'll take both the water and a Gatorade, and I'll just sip a little bit on the Gatorade, swish it around my mouth. My brain's like, sweet, dude, we're getting nutrients. And so it kind of like, you just get a perk of energy just from that alone, because your body thinks, okay, we're getting calories now, so we can let some of the glycogen go from our that we've been holding back. And so you do get a surge of energy. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think everybody's different. They really have, people have to really train with this and get a sense of what they need. But for me, I'll take an element. I will super dose elements before my race. So like 3-4 days out, I'll have 2 elements a day. Normally, I only have one. The morning of the race, so the day before the race, I would have two, and the 3 days prior. And then the morning of the race, I'll take an element in. And then from that point on, I just focus on water.
Perfect. That was going to be my question. I was going to ask right off, what's your like morning routine of a race? Then?
Yeah. So my morning routine is just whatever food, I can handle just fine. And then I'll have an element. And then within 90 minutes to an hour to 90 minutes of the race, I don't consume in any calories, or even element. I'll just have water from that point on. And then the race starts, and then I'll tend to take a go pretty early, because I just kind of want to get the system going with that, and then focus on water from that point on. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, in my marathoning experience, I've taken in, the Morton gels, and then, I mean, I'll try to take in Gatorade as well, or the Powerade. I think at Boston, after mile like 18, I was just trying to get as many calories in as possible.
Well, that's the scenario you don't want to be in.
Yeah.
You want to be. My coach used to tell me we want to drink early and often, and he said that when you get into the late teens, you almost want to feel full. You almost want to be like, dude, I don't want to take anything else in, like, because if you don't have it in, then you're not going to be. By the time you get to 18, 20, you're not going to get it through your system. It's not going to be effective. So you almost need to have it in so that you can even utilize it. So it's like kind of annoying the first half, because you're just like trying to get every station, and you're kind of like locked in to just get fluid in. But then once the later stages of the race happen, then you can kind of just like focus. You don't have to deal as much with a water conversation. You're just like trying to lock in and get through the event. So that's kind of why psychologically, like the first 15 miles, really you do want to focus on fluid stations. And if you're in a major marathon, those hydration stations tend to be marked at the correct points, so that way you pretty much should take it almost every time you see it. So walk me through these guys. So let's go into the science real quick about the hydrogen water. So we talked a little bit about the free radical side, but what does that mean for the fascia, and what does that mean for health trends? And
so fascia, as a whole, is comprised mostly of this specific type of water called EZ water. It stands for exclusion zone water. It's basically an alkaline or basic. That means a pH of above 7. Water that is theoretical. It's very hard to create, and even in like a laboratory setting. So the best we can come close to is hydrogen water. And by drinking the hydrogen water, in theory, your fascial tissue is supported with that more alkaline, basic, and super hydrogenated water to create as close to we can as that exclusion zone water.
And I would say that's kind of like what I taste like when I've had, I think core actually, isn't it?
It's slightly alkaline.
Yeah. And it tastes more like that. There's like it's
like
a
minerally.
It's like a smoother taste. It doesn't taste like hard water. But yeah, I think it also does help absorb into like your body a little bit quicker. So like normally in a process, when you take in water, it sits in your stomach for anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes before it gets into the small intestines, and then it starts to be absorbed. Then it's got to go through the kidneys, and then into the bloodstream, and then into your muscles.
Yeah.
So I think with it being a little bit more, on the basic side, it can skip through some of that process.
Yeah.
A little bit more quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I think these are all really good points. And any final tidbits here on hydration? We're
Just-
gonna we can come back and readdress this topic throughout some other episodes. But
Well, I do have one more question just to kind of bring up too, is like what your opinion is on taking in water versus dumping water on you from a cooling effect. Because if you can cool yourself down, you're going to not sweat as much and not lose
Yeah.
as much salt
so
intake.
when you're in a marathon, the it I think a lot of it depends on the race, right?
Mhm.
Like for instance, when I was in Spain, they gave full bottles,
Mhm.
which was so weird because they're so cognizant in that country about like always having like metal or glass everything for containers. But yet during the race, they had like plastic bottles and they literally give you a full bottle. So like you're not going to drink more than a couple sips in that instance. So
Mhm.
the rest of it went on my body. And I personally tend to run very, very cool. So I like hot races and I can do well in hot weather, just
And I'm
not.
the complete opposite.
Yeah.
I
So-
do very well in cold races.
So I don't, in that race, it got up to 69, 68, 69, about 20 degrees Celsius. And, which is fairly warm, but that felt very comfortable to me because literally every time I had a bottle in my hand, I finished out the bottle on my hat. So I have a hat. I don't have a hat for the sun reason. I have a hat so I can douse it with water and then put it on my head
Mhm.
because about 20% of your heat escapes through your head. So, whenever you have like literally just like a cold pack on your head, like a cold hat, that helps quite a bit to cool off your body.
Mhm.
So I feel like if you in the US, most marathons will put water in Dixie cups. And some races you'll get a feel for them. Some races they'll fill it only a little bit. Well, then you can't. Then you got to
Yeah.
know next water stop. You got to get two.
I think theoretically,
And
they're
some races
supposed
they
to-
go high.
Yeah, I think they're supposed to put 5 ounces in each cup, and so you should be drinking 3 of those ounces and then spilling 2
Yeah,
of them
just
on
throwing
you.
on your chest or your face or whatever, or on your hat.
Don't do that with Gatorade though; it just makes you sticky and uncomfortable.
Dude, there's an art to it for sure. Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I don't even like to take in Gatorade. I mean, you're going to get it all over yourself.
Yeah.
I just bring it up because I remember looking at research in like the early 2000s that they looked at that just literally not even taking in water and just continuously splashing it on you. It had like 35 to 40% of the same effect of drinking water because
well-
you just aren't losing like sweat as much.
Yeah, you're
in
not
the
losing
minerals.
sweat as much. But I bet you that 2/3 of performance that you're missing on
Mhm.
that is probably the cardiovascular drift itself, which
Yeah.
obviously, that wouldn't fix. But that's a good point. And we saw this in some of the Olympic marathons and some of the Olympic trials
Mhm.
marathons the last couple cycles, where the people that ran well were the ones that had the most successful strategy for dealing with heat and
Mhm.
dealing with water loss.
I can't remember the guy's
So
name
this is huge.
at the trials this past year. He was like leading it
Thomas.
yeah,
Yeah.
the whole way, and he missed one water stop at like I think it was like mile 22,
Yeah.
and like within 1 mile, he
Yeah.
just
And at
fell
that
apart.
level, it's just fractions,
Yeah.
Any
It's a-
final tidbits for you?
I was gonna say, like, what's your go-to like mid-marathon drinking technique with the cup? Because I mean, every time I go to drink it, it's just like it goes down the wrong pipe.
Yeah. So, so when you're coming up on a table or you're getting it on somebody handing it to you, and so we're running fast, right? So like it's different for some people, but like you want to grab it and then slowly pull it back
Mhm.
so that way you don't splash it everywhere. So you kind of like carry it back. So you got to have some decent clearance. And then when you get it, then you pinch the cup and then you go inside. And then you
Ah.
don't swallow it immediately. You let it sit in your mouth. And then when you know you're controlled with a breath, then you
Mhm.
swallow it.
The
Mm.
chipmunk,
Yeah.
But-
chipmunk cheek.
Yeah, you got to cheek it a little bit because if you try to take it right away, you're trying to get air in and out. So like you might like catch it and
Yep.
go down the wrong pipe. So like be patient with it and then nurse that over a period of time.
Mhm.
So just know that you might have something in your hand for the next quarter mile. That's fine. You're probably going to miss the point at which you can throw it away, but that's not optimal, but whatever. And then, but yeah, pinching the Dixie cup coming in sideways and then
Mhm.
letting it sit in your mouth until you can take a good swallow and not like, let some of it dribble down.
It's a
Yeah.
good technique. I'll
Well,
Yeah,
try
because
it.
once you start coughing and it's
Yeah,
like down the
no.
wrong pipe and it burns, it's like just terrible.
It's also good
Yes.
for like 3 other things. One, it helps warm the water up a little bit.
Mhm.
And warmer water, it doesn't quench your thirst as much, but it does actually create less GI
Yeah.
distress. And then 2, it slows you from drinking. If you drink more than 5 to 6 ounces in one given time, you can flush your whole gastric system, which means like the little sphincter at the bottom of the stomach opens up partially. So no food can get out, but only the water. And then it just rushes through your system.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it just clears it and you don't actually absorb it. So
Hmm.
that's like one thing
Wonder.
too. If you're like in a heat exhausted mode, you don't want to just chug a bunch of water because it's just going to go through your whole system and you're going to urinate it out and you won't actually
Kinda
get the
nurse it a
benefit
little
of it.
bit.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's why like IVs are so good because it gets straight to your bloodstream. But then also like it's so slow and controlled,
Yeah,
like over a point.
it's literally dripping. Yeah, I would say one final tidbit from my end is that just kind of going back to the basics. How much should you drink? Like we said, half your body weight in ounces. Just keep that simple. The more you exercise, you ramp that up. If you're a moderate exerciser, which most of the listeners probably are in that category, 20% up. And then at least have some sort of electrolyte intake throughout the day. If you have a day where you don't run, I don't think it's terrible that you don't run or exercise. I don't think it's terrible if you don't have one of those. But if you do, pretty much every day you exercise, at least take an element, a liquid IV, or something that will get the electrolytes in the body to help genuinely absorb the water that you are taking in and utilizing it. And then, yeah, tinker with some of the hydrogen water stuff. And we'll put a link in the show notes to the products that the guys have here and just some of the, $40 bottles just to try it on Amazon. It's kind of cool. So,
Absolutely.
any last tidbits?
No.
Awesome. Thank you guys for another great episode. And we'll see you next week for some other fun topics. And if you know anybody that's, needs some hydration tips, feel free to send them this episode. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Leo here. Be sure to check out my new book, Faster Without Fail, Your Guide to Overcoming Injuries and Running Faster Than Ever. It is now available on Amazon. You could read reviews on the Amazon. You can check out what other people have said about it. But basically, if you want to revolutionize your running form and better understand how to stay injury-free within the sport, this is your guide. Feel free to reach out and let us know what you think of the book. I would love to hear your feedback. But again, please check it out on Amazon. Faster Without Fail. Appreciate it. Dr. Leo here. If you want to catch me in another setting, be sure to check out my YouTube page, Running Rehab, where you will find exercises on how to stay healthy with running, how to improve your running form, and a bunch of other tips and tricks on how to get over common injuries.